At my wife's funeral, my own son and his wife sat there smirking, like they couldn't wait to bury me next. I kept my mouth shut, even when my son said, "Well, Mom's gone, Dad. Guess it's your turn to loosen the wallet." I didn't argue. I just watched. What they didn't know was that Alice and I had left one last card on the table, and when the lawyer read her will, it wiped the smirks right off their faces. Justice was coming, and I made sure they felt every ounce of it. I live in Dayton, Ohio. Modest two-story house, beige siding, front lawn that I still mow myself, even though my knees complain every time I push that damn mower uphill. I'm 62, retired from 35 years in logistics management at a trucking company. My wife Alice had been the heart of this home, and when cancer took her just before Thanksgiving, the house felt colder than the Ohio winter outside. People at church brought casseroles. Neighbors stopped by with pies. Everyone seemed to understand what I'd lost. Everyone except my son, Oliver, and his wife, Emma. Oliver's in his 30s, works sales for some tech startup in Columbus. I paid his college tuition, co-signed his first car loan, even fronted part of the down payment on their suburban house. Emma? She's a real estate agent who never misses a chance to remind me how old-fashioned I am. She thinks I should have sold the house years ago and moved into a condo with easier upkeep. Truth is, she sees my home as a fat check waiting to be cashed. At Alice's funeral, they barely looked at me. I caught Oliver scrolling his phone under the pew, while Emma whispered about what kind of SUV she was going to buy once the estate clears. It stung, not just because it was disrespectful, but because it told me they weren't grieving Alice at all. They were waiting for their payday. Still, I kept quiet. That's what Alice would have wanted. She always told me, "Let people show you who they are. Then you'll know exactly how to deal with them." The days after the funeral were brutal. I'd wake up reaching for a coffee mug she wasn't there to fill. I'd catch myself almost yelling her name when the basement light bulb went out. Grief is a sneaky thing. It comes in waves, like Lake Erie wind. But worse than the silence was the way Oliver started circling me, like a vulture. One Saturday, he came over to check in. Instead, he asked straight up if I'd considered putting the house on the market. He suggested a retirement community with shuffleboard and nurses on call, as if I were already half dead. Emma sat beside him, nodding, sipping her latte like she was already the new lady of the house. I gave them nothing. Just a smile and a nod, the same smile Alice gave the day she finalized her will. Because here's the thing they didn't know, Alice wasn't naive. She saw Emma's hunger years ago. She knew Oliver was weak to her influence. So Alice had worked closely with our lawyer, Lisa Crane, to make sure every dollar, every 401k rollover, every last piece of property, went exactly where she wanted. And when the day came for the will to be read, that's when the ground under their feet would finally crack. The week after Alice's funeral, I thought maybe things would calm down. Maybe grief would finally hit Oliver and Emma, and they'd remember this house isn't just four walls. It's where he grew up, where his mother baked cookies every Christmas, where we measured his height on the kitchen doorway with a Sharpie until he left for college. But grief never came. Greed did. Oliver started dropping by unannounced. Not to check if I was eating, not to see how I was sleeping, but to snoop. I caught him rifling through Alice's jewelry box in our bedroom. He held up her pearl necklace, the one her mother gave her on our wedding day, and said, "Emma thinks this would look great on her." Emma wasn't any better. She called me one Tuesday morning, didn't even ask how I was doing, just said, "So when are you planning to list the house? Market's hot right now. If you wait until spring, you'll lose at least 20 grand. I swallowed my anger. If Alice taught me anything, it's that you don't waste bullets on warning shots. Thanksgiving rolled around, my first without Alice, and Oliver insisted on hosting. He wanted to make things easier on me. I should have known better. The minute I walked into their shiny new house, Emma was already bragging about the renovations they'd done thanks to all the help from me. She carved the turkey like she was auditioning for a cooking show, while Oliver clinked his glass and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "We're just glad Mom's gone. Dad can finally move on, sell that old place, and give himself, and us, a fresh start." The table went silent. Emma giggled, then covered it with a cough. My fork froze in midair. My own son had just said those words out loud, on Thanksgiving, 2 weeks after burying his mother. I excused myself to the bathroom before I lost it. In the mirror, My face looked older, heavier. But my eyes? My eyes were sharper than they'd been in years. Alice was right. Let them show you who they are. By Christmas, the pressure doubled. Emma texted me Zillow listings every other day, condos near a golf course, senior communities with great amenities. Oliver cornered me after church one Sunday and said, "Dad, you're sitting on a $500,000 house. Don't you think it's selfish not to share that with us?" Selfish. That was the word he used. After everything I sacrificed. After every dollar I poured into his education, his wedding, his mortgage. After every night Alice stayed up sewing costumes for his school plays. Selfish. That night, I sat alone in the living room, Alice's framed photo on the mantel staring back at me. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and whispered to her picture, "They think they've already won. But they have no idea what you left behind." And that's when the unfairness of it all hardened into something else. Not just grief. Not just anger. A promise. Because if Oliver and Emma wanted to fight over Alice's legacy, they were about to step into a battlefield they didn't even know existed. January came, and with it, the brutal Ohio winter. Snow piled up on the porch, the furnace groaned like it was on its last legs, and the silence of the house pressed on me heavier than the ice on the gutters. But silence doesn't stay empty for long. That's when the phone rang. It was Mr. Whitaker, Alice's attorney. He'd handled our wills and estate planning years ago, back when we were still healthy, still laughing about retirement trips we never got to take. His voice was calm, measured, the way lawyers always sound when they're about to drop something big. "Robert, I think it's time we schedule a reading of Alice's will. I've already contacted Oliver and Emma. How's next Friday?" I remember gripping the receiver so hard my knuckles went white. Alice had been meticulous about everything. I knew she'd left something behind, but I didn't know what. The next Friday, I drove through slush into downtown Columbus, parked in front of Whitaker Klein, and stepped into that oak-paneled office that smelled of old books and polished leather. Oliver and Emma were already there, sitting side by side like 2 vultures who'd spotted a carcass. Emma had on a brand-new cashmere coat. Oliver kept checking his Rolex. Both were grinning like kids about to open Christmas presents. Whitaker shook my hand firmly, then gestured for us to sit. He opened a thick folder, adjusted his glasses, and began reading. At first, it was standard stuff, medical directives, a few bequests to charities Alice cared about, the local library, a church scholarship fund. Emma barely stifled a yawn. Oliver tapped his fingers impatiently on the armrest. And then Whitaker's tone shifted. "To my beloved husband, Robert." Emma leaned forward. Oliver's smirk widened. "I leave our home on Maple Street, to remain in his name, fully paid and untouchable by any claims." Emma's face dropped so fast it was almost comical. Oliver blinked, like the words didn't compute. "To my son Oliver and his wife Emma," Whitaker continued, pausing for effect, "I leave my grandmother's china set and the collection of holiday decorations, which I know Emma admired so much." I swear I heard Emma suck in air so sharp it whistled. Oliver muttered under his breath, "You've got to be kidding me." But Whitaker wasn't done. "Finally, to Robert, I leave control of my retirement accounts, including my 401k and pension, with full discretion on distribution. I trust him to use them wisely, as he always has." The lawyer closed the folder. Silence filled the room, thick enough to choke on. Emma's jaw clenched. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her designer purse. Oliver finally broke. "That's it? Mom didn't mean that. She must have forgotten. She told me once she wanted me to have the house." Whitaker looked at him with the kind of polite, deadly calm only attorneys have. "Your mother signed this just 8 months ago, Mr. Peterson. It was witnessed, notarized, and filed properly. This is legally binding." That was the first time I'd seen Oliver lose color in his face since he was a kid with the flu. But here's the thing. This wasn't even the knockout punch. Not yet. Because Alice, God bless her, had slipped something else into that will. Something Whitaker hadn't read aloud yet, something sealed in a separate envelope. And when I caught the faintest smile tugging at Whitaker's lips as he gathered the papers, I realized. Alice had planned for this exact day. She knew Oliver. She knew Emma. She knew me. And she wasn't just protecting me, she was setting a trap. That night, after the will reading, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the house too quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. My hands were still trembling from the scene at Whitaker's office. The image of Oliver's pale face and Emma's clenched jaw replayed in my mind like a loop. But what unsettled me most wasn't their anger, it was the way Whitaker had paused before closing that folder. That subtle smile. Almost like he knew something the rest of us didn't. 2 days later, I found out I was right. Whitaker called again, his voice steady, but tinged with something heavier. "Robert, Alice left behind a sealed letter addressed only to you. It wasn't part of the formal will reading, but she instructed me to deliver it after." When I picked it up, I sat in my car for nearly an hour before I could even open it. Her handwriting on the envelope nearly broke me, graceful cursive, steady as ever. She must have written it when she knew her time was running out. Inside was a 3-page letter. And it changed everything I thought I knew. Alice had always been practical, almost frugal. She taught Sunday school, clipped coupons, baked pies for the neighbors. But in her letter, she confessed something I'd never known. Back in the 1980s, when we were raising Oliver and struggling to pay off our first mortgage, Alice had taken a job at a local accounting firm. She didn't just do filing or answering phones. She quietly rose through the ranks, handling retirement portfolios, investment accounts, and eventually corporate finances. And apparently, Alice had a gift. She'd invested not just her own 401k, but rolled over extra savings into mutual funds, stocks, and, here's the kicker, early tech companies. Microsoft, Apple, even Amazon back when it was just a weird little online bookstore. By the time she left the firm in the late 90s to care for her mother, she had a portfolio that, in today's dollars, was worth millions. I sat there staring at the page. Millions. Alice had been quietly growing it all these years, reinvesting dividends, making careful trades. I'd thought her coupon clipping and frugal ways were just old habits from growing up poor. But no, she'd been quietly playing the long game. And then came the line that floored me. "Robert, I never told Oliver because I saw the way he grew up expecting everything handed to him. He never wanted to earn it. He let Emma feed that greed. I couldn't leave them this money, not without watching them destroy each other. But I trust you to decide how to use it. I trust you to protect the family name." Tears blurred the words. My wife, who I thought I'd known inside and out for 42 years, had been carrying this secret, protecting me, protecting us, all along. And then, in the final paragraph, her foreshadowed trap. "If Oliver and Emma try to contest the will, and I know they will, Whitaker has instructions to reveal the trust. It is ironclad, set up years ago. They can't touch it. They'll only embarrass themselves trying." The letter ended with a line that hit me in the gut. "You always thought I was the heart of this family, Robert. But I want you to know, I was also the shield." I folded the letter back into its envelope, hands shaking. Alice hadn't just left me memories, or even the house. She'd left me the weight of her foresight. She'd planned for Oliver's entitlement, Emma's manipulation, every selfish move they'd make. And suddenly, the smile Whitaker gave during that reading made perfect sense. He knew Alice's game. He was waiting for them to take the bait. I leaned back in my chair, for the first time in months feeling something strange and powerful. Not grief. Not anger. But anticipation. Because the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The summons came in a thin white envelope, postmarked 2 weeks after Alice's will reading. I'd been expecting it. Oliver and Emma weren't the kind of people to lick their wounds in silence. No, they wanted blood, or at least the house and every dollar they thought belonged to them. Inside, petition to contest last will and testament of Alice Graham. Filed with the probate court in Columbus, Ohio. Signed by Emma herself. I laughed out loud. Emma had always fancied herself the brains of their marriage, but I could practically see Alice's grin from the grave. Still, I knew better than to underestimate them. Contesting a will isn't cheap, filing fees, court costs, attorneys. Clearly, they'd scraped together just enough to think they had a shot. The first hearing came on a gray Tuesday morning in March. The kind of morning when the courthouse smelled like wet paper and burnt coffee. I wore the only suit I owned, the one Alice had bought me back when Oliver got married. It was snug around the middle now, but it would do. When I walked into the probate courtroom, I spotted Oliver and Emma at the far end. She wore a sharp navy skirt suit, hair slicked back like she was auditioning for a legal drama on TV. Oliver sat hunched beside her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Their lawyer, a smarmy guy in his 40s with a Rolex that practically screamed, "overcompensating," smirked when he saw me. But then Whitaker entered. Calm, deliberate, every paper in perfect order. He nodded at me, and I suddenly felt less alone. The judge, an older woman with steel-gray hair and a reputation for hating nonsense, took her seat. "All right, let's hear this contest." Emma's lawyer launched into his spiel. Alice was of unsound mind, the will was improperly executed, undue influence by me. He painted me as some manipulative widower, scheming to cut out his own son. I sat stone-faced. Let him talk. Then Whitaker stood, voice steady as bedrock. "Your Honor, the petitioners are wasting this court's time. Mrs. Graham's will was executed in 2019, notarized, and witnessed by 2 independent parties. But more importantly," he paused, letting the silence hang, "the estate itself is no longer under the will. It is protected by the Graham Family Trust, established in 2005. You could have heard a pin drop. Emma blinked, confusion breaking through her rehearsed composure. "What trust?" she hissed at Oliver, but the judge heard it, eyebrows arching. Whitaker slid a thick binder onto the desk. "This trust predates any claim of undue influence. It holds all significant assets, including the marital home, investment accounts, and property. The will covers only personal items of negligible monetary value." The judge flipped a few pages, her frown deepening. "Counsel, is this accurate?" she asked Emma's lawyer. He stammered, caught off guard. "We, were not aware of this trust." I nearly smiled. Alice's foresight was unfolding right before my eyes. Whitaker continued, per Mrs. Graham's explicit instructions, "The trust is irrevocable. The sole trustee and beneficiary is her surviving spouse, Robert Graham. Any attempt to contest it is not only futile, but may trigger the no contest clause, which strips the petitioners of even their minor inheritances." Emma's face turned crimson. Oliver tugged at his tie, sweat blooming on his forehead. The judge leaned back in her chair. "So, to clarify, if they pursue this contest, they risk forfeiting everything they might have received?" "That is correct, Your Honor," Whitaker said smoothly. Oliver shot to his feet, slamming his palms on the table. "This is bull. She wanted me to have that house. My whole childhood was there." The judge's gavel cracked. "Sit down, Mr. Graham. Outbursts will not be tolerated." Emma grabbed his arm, yanking him back into his seat, whispering furiously. They looked like cornered animals, caught in a trap they didn't even realize existed until it was too late. And that was the moment it hit me. Alice had orchestrated all of this. She'd known their greed would drive them to court. She'd known Emma's arrogance would push them too far. And she'd left me not just the assets, but the leverage. The judge tapped her pen. "Given the evidence presented, I see no valid grounds for this contest. Petition denied. Furthermore, I find the petitioners acted in bad faith. Court costs will be their responsibility." I swear the air went out of Oliver's lungs like a balloon. Emma's perfectly painted smile cracked, just a little. Meanwhile, Whitaker simply closed his binder, calm as ever. As the judge adjourned, Emma hissed across the aisle at me, voice dripping venom. "You think this is over, old man?" I finally allowed myself a thin smile. "No, Emma. I think this is just the beginning." Because here's the twist Alice hadn't told anyone but Whitaker. The trust wasn't just about protecting assets. It included stipulations. Conditions. I discovered them only after her letter. One clause in particular gave me the power to loan, or withhold, funds from Oliver's business ventures. The very ventures he'd been bragging about over Thanksgiving. They thought they could strip me of dignity in that courtroom. Instead, they walked out saddled with legal fees, their pride shredded, and the knowledge that I now held the keys to their financial future. And for the first time since Alice's funeral, I walked out of that courthouse with my shoulders straight. Not as a grieving widower, but as a man holding all the cards. For weeks after court, Oliver and Emma went radio silent. No phone calls. No surprise visits. Just silence. Part of me thought maybe, just maybe, they'd learned their lesson. But then I remembered who I was dealing with. And sure enough, the silence broke. One Saturday morning, as I was sipping my coffee on the porch, a white envelope slid through my mail slot. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dad, we're in trouble. Emma's boutique is sinking. We need $50,000. You can help, or you can watch your own family fail. No please. No apology. Just entitlement dressed up as desperation. I should have been angry. Instead, I laughed. Loud and long, the kind of laugh Alice used to scold me for because it scared the dog. They thought I was still the same man they mocked at the funeral. The man who sat quiet while they sneered. But Alice had left me more than money. She'd left me a roadmap, and a backbone I didn't know I still had. I called Whitaker that afternoon. I want to exercise the discretionary clause in the trust, I said. Ah, he replied, almost gleeful. The business loan provision. Exactly. But not the way they think. The following week, I invited Oliver and Emma to meet me at Whitaker's office downtown. Neutral ground, no excuses. They showed up 20 minutes late, Emma storming in like she owned the place, Oliver trailing behind like a guilty teenager. Whitaker gestured for them to sit. Mr. Graham has reviewed your request. Emma leaned forward, fake smile plastered on. So you'll help? We knew you'd come through. Family always comes through. I held her gaze. I am going to help. But not with cash. Confusion flickered across her face. Oliver frowned. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were documents Whitaker had drawn up, a strict repayment plan, collateral requirements, and a stipulation that Emma relinquish her voting rights in her boutique's LLC until the loan was repaid. Emma's jaw dropped. This is insulting. You expect me to sign this? I leaned back. No, Emma. I expect you to learn. You don't get to treat me like dirt at a funeral and then come begging for handouts. This isn't charity. It's business. Oliver looked between us, torn, his face pale. Dad, come on, we're drowning here. For a split second, I saw the boy he used to be, before Emma's sharp edges carved into him. But then I remembered him laughing, actually laughing, as Emma joked about my wife's death. And my heart hardened. You made your choices, I said quietly. Alice warned me about this. That's why she gave me control. So I wouldn't watch you throw her legacy away. Whitaker chimed in smoothly, if you refuse, that's your right. But legally, Mr. Graham is under no obligation to extend any funds. The trust's discretionary clause gives him full authority. Emma slammed the folder shut. We don't need this. We'll find another way. I smiled faintly. I hope you do. Because until you respect what's been handed to you, this door is closed. They stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots down the hall. That night, I poured myself a bourbon and sat by the fireplace. For the first time since Alice passed, the house didn't feel empty. It felt alive, like she was right there whispering, "Took you long enough, Bobby." A week later, I got word Emma's boutique filed for bankruptcy. Oliver's credit cards were maxed, their mortgage teetering on foreclosure. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. But I also didn't bail them out. Because justice isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's about refusing to enable the people who tear you down. I started volunteering at the community center, helping retirees understand their 401k plans and estate options. Folks who reminded me of Alice, hardworking, overlooked, underappreciated. For the first time in years, I felt useful again. Neighbors began stopping by, asking for advice on wills, mortgages, HOA nonsense. Word got around, Robert Graham isn't just some grieving old man. He's the guy who stood his ground. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the maples, I stood on my porch and thought back to the funeral. The laughter, the sting, the humiliation. And then I thought of the judge's gavel, Emma's cracked smile, Oliver's empty eyes. Alice had the last laugh. And through her, so did I. So when people ask me how I survived losing her, I tell them this. She left me more than memories. She left me power. And I finally learned how to use it. Losing Alice taught me something brutal but freeing. not everyone who shares your blood deserves a seat at your table. Family isn't about DNA. It's about respect, loyalty, and the way people show up for you when life knocks you flat. For years, I believed being a good father meant giving without question, forgiving without boundaries. But unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional access. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do for yourself, and for the people who take you for granted, is to close the door and let them face the storm they've created. What happened with Oliver and Emma wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. About the way people think they can strip you of it when you're grieving, when you're vulnerable. They wanted to define me by what they thought I lacked: power, usefulness, relevance. But the truth? I had more strength than they could ever see. And maybe that's the real lesson here. We live in a culture where parents often drain themselves dry for their kids, where family is used as a guilt trip to excuse abuse, entitlement, or neglect. But respect goes both ways. If someone laughs at your pain, belittles your worth, or treats you like an ATM with a pulse, then walking away isn't cruel. It's survival. I used to think justice always came with a gavel, a courtroom, some grand showdown. But sometimes, justice is quieter. It's choosing peace over chaos. It's reclaiming your identity when people try to erase it. It's realizing that the person you thought you couldn't live without, your partner, your child, your so-called family, might actually be the anchor weighing you down. Alice gave me more than money. She gave me permission to remember who I am. And once I finally picked myself back up, I understood, empowerment doesn't arrive when the world gives you a seat. It arrives when you build your own damn table. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this: don't confuse blood with loyalty, or silence with weakness. Protect your peace, protect your worth, and never let anyone laugh at your grief and think they've won. Because in the end, the sweetest revenge isn't getting even. It's living well, without them. They laughed at my loss, but I smiled at their downfall. If you believe in justice and sweet revenge, hit subscribe and join the Velvet Kiss Revenge family.